39, 40, 41 in those times. Okay. Here is a glimpse of the campus. Notice the street light in the middle of the intersection. This is Main Street. This is what we call Highway 47, or they call the Hopewell-Marthansville Road. You'll notice concrete sidewalks and then mud roads. Here's the Methodist Church. This is the second Methodist church. The first one was Jubilee Chapel. Next to that is Niedering House Gym. Here is the ladies' dormitory, and here is Kessler Hall.
That's good. Kenny James.
Now, this was built because the original of this burnt down. The ladies' dormitory burnt down. Dr. Kessler died in that fire trying to save some residents in the
I
fire.
went to school at Kessler Hall.
Okay, you went to school at Kessler? What grades? Do you know?
Freshman, sophomore. I think freshman, sophomore.
Freshman, sophomore? Okay.
Junior even.
Okay, very good. I didn't know that. Thank you.
49,
Okay.
47.
Okay. That's before Woodrow bought all that. Yeah, Woodrow or Sullivan bought that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He bought it while we were still there.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, next one. Here's a little ground level photograph. Again, I think this may be a little earlier than the other one because it doesn't catch that light pole. They may have been standing on it. But what makes me think it's earlier is if you look at the tire marks here in this dirt road, they're narrow. I think they're buggy tracks. And right here, I think you'll see what the propellant that was used to make the buggy. Yeah, the exhaust, as Mr. Razor would say, the exhaust pipe did that. Yeah, okay. Here is the green building. I've not been able to spend enough time to know exactly where this was. I think it was on the south side of Main Street in that Orchland parking lot area before some of the masonry buildings were built across the street from it. This was at one time an infirmary for the college. Early on, it was a music department, which is what Kessler ended up being built for, is for music. It had an auditorium and a stage, and it could seat several hundred. Next photograph. And this is Niedering House Gym. Now, how many hands went to school there? You guys are kin. I like it. Yeah. All right. This building was built by the Niedering House family as a gift to the college. Niedering House was a graduate of Central Wesleyan in the 1870s, I believe it was. He and J.C. Jacoby was also another graduate from that time. And it had division classrooms down here, had a gymnasium here, had a suspended track that went all the way around up on the top. Like I say, almost everybody that went to school in Warrenton that is our age up until our kids' age. Actually, I think my daughter went to kindergarten in the basement of that. I think, hey, you did? Yeah. Mary Brock, did you teach in that?
No,
Nope.
I did not. Judy Myers, did you teach in
Did
that?
you teach in it? Okay.
Judy
Kindergarten.
is my teacher.
Is that your teacher? We've got a reunion. All right. I love it. Yeah.
When I went to school, they were building the junior high, and we had to go to school there for a while.
No, you got to go to school there.
But I also went to kindergarten.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Well, they built two
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I was gonna say, they built temporary classrooms for the junior high before the 8 rooms of the
Okay.
old high school were built.
Okay.
Yeah, so the junior high was in there
In there.
for like 6
Okay.
weeks or something.
Cool.
Then they carried their desks down to the new buildings.
Okay, yeah, they had to, I've heard that story, they had to physically move their desks down to the new high school. No new furniture for this group. Yes. Go ahead.
A funny story that I have to tell, that school, about the same time when the kids were going to kindergarten there, they also held, the Warren County Fair that was the Warren County Fair exhibit hall. And
Okay.
so 4-H, which I was a part of 4-H, were able to make things and take things there for prizes. It was the premiums, you know.
Yes.
So anyway, made a chocolate cake. It was supposed to be a red velvet cake according to the recipe. Well, it was just a regular chocolate cake. Took it there on a paper plate, and on the way up those steps you see, the cake fell off of the plate and turned upside down. On the steps, okay? So what are you gonna do? You got a chocolate cake on the steps. So I flipped it back over on the paper plate. The icing that stuck to the steps was dirty, but the icing that was still on the cake was clean. I entered it in the contest and I won a blue ribbon.
I wonder what Speed Auger House down at the bakery would think of that. You know? That's great. That's great. Okay. Penny noted that the National Guard met here. Was that you? Were you in
It
National?
was multi-purpose because this corner room in the basement was caged off, and National Guard had their rifles, and that was a big draw for us walking by to see
Yeah.
those rifles all stacked up and the lock and sure.
I was in 7th grade in that building with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and so we knew the National Guard.
It was there. Yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Walter Henderson, there's a name I hadn't heard in a while. Okay, it was used for the county school, primary school graduations. This is the 8th grade in 1927. All came to town, got to get in the big buildings, get their diplomas. This is the Jubilee Chapel. This was a church that preceded the college church now, and I'm pretty sure that that is the parsonage that was replaced in Janine, about the middle 70s. Do you remember, Don, Charlotte? Do you remember when they took down the
It was in the
mid-70s?
mid-70s.
Okay. Okay, so that building lasted a good long time. Right to the east of that, I believe this house is where Benjamin K. Frick lived. Benjamin was the county engineer for Warren County for something like 60 years before the present engineer. He and his brothers were offspring of John O.K. Frick, who was in the first graduating class at Central Wesleyan, and he stayed to teach. He was a science teacher. I don't remember their names anymore, but I do remember that every one of John O.K. Frick's sons' middle name was a president. That was just what he did. Okay?
Must've been something they did way back then.
Yeah.
Because all of my uncles, my grandpa, everybody was named after a president, even my grandma.
Yeah. But now, about half the time, sounds like they're named after a breakfast cereal or some kind of color. So yeah. Okay. Kessler Hall, this stained glass is in the lobby of the Missouri Bank, which which stands there on that corner now. They bought this after it was no longer used as the Katy Jane. This was the second Katy Jane. The first building was the women's dormitory.
He bought that first.
Yeah, and then this one he was remodeling into another nursing home. It had ladders laying around where they'd been working on it. Next photograph. This is the gospel team from Central Wesleyan College. This is 1918. Carl Lutz is this man right here. And if you've looked, he's on the board out here as an important citizen that lived in this town. Go with me now, 1944, Budapest, Hungary. The Crossed Arrows Fascist Party are eliminating Jews. They're shooting Jews. The lady is shot and in the Danube River. This man, who was the vice consul at the Swiss embassy, was driving by. Stops his car in his suit, jumps into the river, puts this woman on his arm, brings her out, presents himself to the Hungarian authorities and said, this person is a foreign citizen under the protection of the Swiss government. And with that, he puts her in the car and takes her back to the embassy. That's the least of what this man did. He, because he was here as a student to become a pastor, in his third year he decided he didn't want to become a pastor. He went to work for the Swiss embassy in St. Louis, and for the next 15 years he went back and forth between Philadelphia and St. Louis. Then he went to Jaffa, Israel, which was Palestine at that time, because the British government had petitioned Palestine to give the Jewish people a homeland. And that made the German citizens there in 1939 persona non grata, and they were being harassed and forced to leave Palestine. And because Carl Lutz was the vice consul there, he gave those German citizens protection so that he could get them moved back to Germany without casualty. Now jump forward, 1939, 1944, and now the Germans are eliminating, they've got the sympathetic fascist governments of the Balkans, like Hungary. This Crossed Arrow Party is Hungarian, and they're eliminating. They're getting ready when the German troops occupied Hungary in 1944. Karl Lutz went to the German government, to the Hungarian government, and said, give me 8,000 waivers to move some Jews out of here to send them to Palestine. They, I guess because they, had been helped by the German people, that had been helped by Karl Lutz, they granted him these 8,000 waivers. This man is not altogether honest. Instead of 8,000 people, he makes that 8,000 families. He establishes 76 safe houses in Budapest that were a extension of the Swiss embassy and had all the rights and privileges of a Swiss embassy. They couldn't be entered by the Hungarian troops or the German troops. He has the Glass House, which holds over 1,000 people in downtown Budapest. There he keeps and moves Jewish people through that. At the end of the war, they think he saved around 62,000 people. Schindler saved 1,100. Okay, he got a movie. Carl Lutz got shoved to the side. He was never promoted in the Foreign Service, in the embassy service, in his lifetime. They took him, he moved back to Switzerland, and he stayed, he was still a vice consul, but he ended up better than the Portuguese embassy fellow, Simpatico Rigatti. He ended up dying in poverty. He moved untold thousands through Portugal using the same ruse that Carl Lutz did. When Carl Lutz had used all of his documents to move people out, he just started making more, and he'd number them between 1 and 8,000. And as a matter of fact, he got so good at it, the German consulate in Budapest, towards the end of the war, petitioned the Berlin government to allow them to assassinate him. The war ended before that happened. In the early 60s, the Israeli government recognized Carl Lutz as righteous among the nations. I think he was the second or third person that the Israeli government recognized as righteous among nations. A good Methodist boy doing what Methodist people do. Okay, right here. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. The Reverend Walter Schwaney, thank you, was performing his normal Sunday afternoon church service at the Katie Jane about 2 o'clock, and he was into his probably second or third hymn, which was What a Friend We Have in Jesus, when Charlotte Shoei notices fire or smoke coming from underneath the door of a utility closet underneath the steps at the Katie Jane building. She hollers fire. They start moving people out. That day was a Sunday. The fire chief, Bill Hanner, and his wife, Jewel, had left that morning to take their friends, the Hummels, who had flew in from California to see him, took them back to the airport. So that's where Bill and Jewel were. Melvin Shoei and his wife Carlotta had gone to St. Louis to visit with Carlotta's folks. He got the call that Katie Jane was on fire. Of course, he immediately left to come back to Warrenton to fight the fire. Well, while the fire's going on, I tell you, these 83-year-old memories are an aggravation. But Bobby Berger brought the fire truck from this corner where City Hall is right now up to the Katie Jane and started pumping water into the fire. I think Homer Avis was there. Did your dad ever talk about that, Ben?
Never talked about it.
Never.
He except to say he was there.
Okay, well, the story I get is that he passed the hose to Homer or other people that were there, and then ran back down the street to get the other fire truck to bring it up. Just people that were going by. Jack Barada had a hardware store here. He happened to be there. Old Bill Turner that lives out on Highway U, he was there. and they just started throwing ladders up against the building to try to get up and get these people out of the harm's way. Phil Miltenberger told me he can remember, he lived over on Steinhagen next to the O'Sullivans, and he and a couple of his buddies were on the north side of this building. He said fire was shooting out up above, but he said these two ruffians, he called them, and he gave me their names, and I can see their faces, but I can't remember their names right now. But he said they were 18, 19-year-old, just little hoodlums that, you know, were around town. But he said these three guys were helping people get out of their rooms because they couldn't get to the front. The fire was involved. We have in the museum the original investigation on that done by Bonnie Wright's dad, who was a sheriff at the time. It was never determined what caused that fire. So we'll have to, I guess, just go with supposition and think about how this was built. This was a brick building with a wooden floor, wooden stairs,
Oil.
and they oiled those floors. When I first went to Nieberg's once a week, we put oil in the top of the broom and then we swept the floors. Been doing that for a long time. So we have that kind of floor. We're at a stairwell. Does anybody remember the power plant over by the railroad tracks? That had a tunnel that carried steam pipes to all the college buildings.
I
One of
remember
them
when they
came,
knocked it down.
yeah, that had a masonry flue, if you will, that came into the basement of the Katie Jane building. We've got a fire going here. We've got plenty of oxygen. We've got plenty of material. It was pretty much done in 30, 40 minutes. It was burned to the next. Burned to this point. Your dad's in. Your dad's, that's right. That's another.
Basement.
Yes,
It's in the
okay.
basement.
This, these two children and their mother, their dad was with Woodrow in Montgomery City at a bowling tournament when this happened. And, yeah, was Cal News in there too?
Yeah.
Okay. I think your dad told me that he didn't know how fast they were going because he was in the front floorboard of that Cadillac when it came through Jonesburg. He said, I don't know how fast we was going, but we were going as fast as that vehicle would go, you know. As Melvin Shoei starts back out here from his in-laws' house, he recognizes Bill and Jules' car on 40. Carlotta rolls down the window and hollers at Bill because she recognized Katie Jane's on fire. So they both step it up and get back here. This was before there was any kind of sprinkler systems or any kind of fire preventing things. As a matter of fact, the Katie Jane is credited with changing a lot of nursing home laws across the nation because of this. Now, the fact is that there were 150, 70 patients there. 72 of them died in that. Those are facts. But the story is these people that busted every barrier they had to save these people, put that fire out. It was a community thing. Next photograph. This is Polster's Corner. Go ahead, next photograph. It was replaced by this building which is diagonally across from the Katie Jane Corner. Harry, Katie, and Walter Peppelmeyer were going to open their new IGA food liner. I think their daughter, or Walter's daughter, Donella, was there. And they were stocking shelves and pricing things on the shelves. It was the only building with heat that had any floor space. So all of the survivors who are in various states of inability were carried over there and kept and put in that building. Again, just community needed, there it is, you do it. That is one of the things that defines this community. It's kind of like the college. For 80 years, it pretty much defined the culture and the values of the community. This particular incident was a gathering point, the stories of what people did. One more.
That fire was in February, right?
February 17th, I think, yeah. I was 17 years old, 1957. Oh, I did, there's a little story. See these posts? Anybody remember those posts? What were they there for?
The back end.
So you wouldn't drive into the front of Harry and Walter's store. There's about 10 foot between those posts and the front of that store. I was at this intersection one time, and Gladys Debroke came up from downtown, drove right in between the store and those posts on the sidewalk. Shut off the ignition on her silver 1963 Chrysler, which she probably bought at Myers Motor, and went in to do her shopping. Yeah. We've always had folks like that. We had Gladys Ike. I was at the IGA store when it was across from the Methodist Church one day. They had these concrete curbs to keep you from getting up too close to the store. She hit that, jumped it into the ice machine, put it in reverse, jumped it back out, got out and went in, did her grocery shopping. We had Frank Holman, who lived up across from the post office. When Frank was going to back out of his driveway, get the hell out of the way, because he was going to back out of the driveway. You know? I worked with a fellow named Oscar Struckmeyer, one of the neatest guys I've ever worked with. We used to get in a delivery truck and we'd go down these country roads, and he'd point out this farm or that farm, and he'd tell me, this guy worked really hard for this farm. This guy, he married this farm. This guy, he stole this farm. But anyhow, Oscar knew all the stories, whether they were true or not, about that. But behind our furniture store, we had our dock. And for loading furniture, he would pull in, swerve out to the left, put it in reverse, and back up to the dock. One day, he backs up and he hits a car, and he is irate because he did have a temper. And he got out and he said, "What in the world are you thinking?" He said, "I've been backing in here for 32 years. Everybody knows when I pull up like that, I'm going to back in. What were you thinking?" She said, "Sir, I'm from Troy." Well, we're not going to try to wear out the Schoenbergs. We pretty well beat them up all the time. This is the original Schoenberg house that Ernest and a little bit built. It's quite different from what's there now. This is the house of Laura and Sarah Whiteman. mother and daughter, a widow and her daughter live here. In 1878, 76, something like that, after Ernst's wife dies, he and his son Franklin go to St. Louis, and father and son, and marry mother and daughter. And that is, the Franklin and Laura story is basically what you see at the Schoengert house. Ernst really didn't have any intention to stay here. He had bought a farm in Bellflower, had several farms in Bellflower. As a matter of fact, he's in a mausoleum that he built up there. He buried his wife, his first wife, in that mausoleum up there. He was on his way there. The Schoengert family is a little bit odd, and maybe not. Their oldest son, John, leaves the family business here, the mercantile company, because of ill health. He leaves. His health was so ill that in the next 25 years, he builds out the commercial district of Bellflower. And if you go to Bellflower today, you'll see there are curbs and gutters where there are no houses. But he intended for there to be a town there. Unfortunately, the railroad didn't come through, but that's what he was building.